What's up, everybody? So, Horus Heresy, Book 9, Crusade from Forge World has come out, and I read up on my copy. So, before I do any other type of specific topics pertaining to information from a Horus Heresy book or whatever, I like to do a initial impressions ramble for the book. And that's what's going to happen here. There will be plenty of topics to come for this book, the other books of the Horus Heresy series from Forge World, because they're all loaded with stuff to still talk about. And there will be a long-winded, very long-winded Ramblecast with me and my buddy who's been on Ramblecast before. We're both First Legion fans, and we both have Book 9 and the Lion model, so we're going to be rambling on that. That's happening. It will happen once we can fit it into our schedule. There's no rush. It's not like it must be by this time. We'll just have fun with it when we can. So, with all that said, this is just the initial impressions ramble. And honestly, it's mostly just talking about the contents throughout the book. The formula for the book is the same as it's been for all of the Horus Heresy books from Forge World, which is fantastic. It is a documentary style book that Forge World really got right with their Imperial Armor series of old and have continued on that legacy with their Horus Heresy books. It feels great, and I really do love that setup, that style. But what I also find really interesting is, at least to me, I don't really feel like any of the books that I own. I don't own book 4 yet. When it came out, it felt like a purely filler book to me, so I never really got involved in trying to buy it. Because it didn't really do anything special or different or carry on anything unique for the Legions for me. So for me, the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy is the Astarte story. That's why I never bought book 4. But I'm going to try and get it to round up my collection if I can find the hard copy for not too much. Anyways, with that little tangent aside, the formula there, I'm sure, is the same as we see in the rest of these books. And as a result, I feel the quality of the book and their writing and their setup is the same. Honestly, I don't feel one book is of a higher quality than the other. However, Book 7 and Book 9 are my favorites. I don't think they're necessarily better on any objective level than any other book from the series, but they contain what I'm fans of, or a fan of, I should say, because it's just me. Love Custodes and the pre-heresy Thousand Suns pseudo-Egyptian aesthetic that I can't get enough of is also carried forth in Book 7, with the Thousand Suns being there. Love those two factions. Book 7 I'm a fan of. Book 9 that just came out is the First Legion's book, the Dark Angels book. We finally have them covered. That's how I got into 40k, is Dark Angels, so definitely a fan of Book 9 as well. So 7 and 9 are my favorites. But it doesn't mean that I think they're written better than 3 or 2 or 6 or whatever else. It's just what you're a fan of. That's how I view it anyway. People do differ. Some people view it based on the number of legions covered or whatever else. But for me, it really boils down to, what are you a fan of? And yes, I know there's a Solar Auxilia in Book 4 and some Imperial Militia stuff. There's also another book, and there's also mechanical stuff, but I'm talking Legion Astartes, which is the focal point of the Horus Heresy. Whatever first founding force you're a fan of, that was weird. Whatever first founding force you're a fan of, that's a lot of F's to say. That's the book you're probably going to take interest in. If you're a White Scars fan and you enjoy the lore behind the force that you're a fan of, you're going to want Book 8. It's just the way it is. So, to me, this tangent will be done soon in a minute. These books, I think, are all on the same plane of existence, and whichever ones are elevated as your favorites are because typically of the faction you're a fan of. So, with that said, Book 9, setting-wise, is the Thramas campaign, and that timeline-wise concludes before the First Legion muster to strike forth towards Imperium Seconds to see what's the deal over there. So, with that said, timeline-wise, this book covers up to that point, up to that Dark Angel muster to set forth. And it obviously covers specifically the Thramas campaign and then the Dark Angel's history and everything else. So we do have some expanded lore for the Night Lords and some literally just like a few pages of stuff for the Titan legions of the Triplex worlds, which is great. Nice little world expansion stuff, setting, expanding lore. But really, the rest of it is just the campaign, the worlds of that area, and the Dark Angels history. Now, I will say this: there is the Thromasi Night Watch, which is a Solar Auxilia style of an army force for that sector, and they play a big role in the setting. Right? They are haggard tremendously by it. They fight where they can, do what they can, and they have interesting honor guard type stuff for a standard human force and everything. And we don't really get much to really call them out in terms of descriptors or information, and we don't get a piece of art for them at all. Like we do for the example Legionary, it would have been cool to see an example of Thermasian Nightwatch. We don't get that. It doesn't kill anything. And I've been through the book page by page, unless I just straight up overlooked it. We don't get anything like that. But it doesn't hurt it at all. It's just a nitpicking point of reference. It doesn't bother really me at all, because I'm here for the First Legion. But for as much as the Thermasian Nightwatch play a role and are talked about, it would have been cool to at least get one piece of art. That's all I got to say on that. Anyways, what Forge World does here is what they've done for all of their books, because Black Library's novel series existed and was growing prior to the Horus Heresy series for Forge World even starting. And what I'm referring to is incorporating pivotal things talked about in the Horus Heresy series and the to come, the Primarch series and the Siege of Terror series. All this stuff will more than likely get incorporated and talked about in some capacity for future Forge World books. And in the here and now, they've done a great job in talking about key points and bringing it into the fold of their Forge World books. They've done this in the past with Isfin 3 and the Dropside Massacre and the Sieging of Prospero and all that jazz, so it's no surprise. But they always do a good job with it. With the Dark Angels, they cover the Sarosh incident. That's kind of just lore building for the Dark Angels. They cover the sieging of the Ordonatus engines on a Forge World by the Lion and his strike force that they later gift to the Iron Warriors, unknowing that they are traitor at that time. And I've noticed people pointed this out when that novel came out, and incorrectly. Nobody knew that the Iron Warriors at that time were traitor. It's not like the Lion made a secret pact with the Iron Warriors. The Iron Warriors were en route to be the second wave for the Isfin 5 attack. And everybody thought this full second wave was loyal, which is why they were sent. So the Iron Warriors are on their way, and they basically were near enough that they were able to pick up those engines, and unbeknownst to the Lion, use them against the Loyalists. So anyways, that's covered real briefly as a little footnote. And a little quick blurb, I'm going to butcher this, the Chichula engine, which is an important part of the Thramas campaign story-wise anyway, is also covered. Now these three things are just three examples of probably a couple others that I haven't brought up, of them incorporating things that possibly were viewed important enough to showcase here to ease any fears if they were still part of the setting's lore and everything. And they did it in such a way that if you didn't read any of those stories, you'd have an understanding of the importance of these events and their implications. But if you read those stories and you saw these little blurbs, you would see them as the nice little gems of an Easter egg that they are, and move on. So that's pretty cool. I think they did a good job with that. The Thramas campaign was a fun read. You get to see how brutal it is. You get to see how debased and butchery the Night Lords have become, as we would expect them to be, with their grisly trophies and what have you. And then we get to see also the fury of the Dark Angels unleashed as well, and the Lion, and it's just a good time. In the history section for the Dark Angels, basically the Dark Angels specific lore of their creation, their growing pains, and everything else, we get a real sense of the Legion Astartes in general, because they quite literally paved the way for all the Legion Astartes. Not going to go into that here. But they were the first Legion by far. You know, they numbered 10,000, where some of the more numerous younger legions, as they called them, were only 1,000 or two strong, with others being just a couple of companies strong. So they were the oldest of the legions and the largest for a period of time, and really pushed forth and did things when the others were still just learning how to walk, you could say. But outside of that, we get a good sense of, I should say a good sense, we get a little glimpse, which is really cool, is a better way of putting it, of the actual origins of the Astartes proper. Because we know Primarchs get whisked away, their genetic material is used and distilled down to create gene seed to create the Astartes. But there's a bridge from point A to point B, and that bridge is experimentation and prototype stuff, and we get a little glimpse into that, which is pretty cool. We get further explanation and doubling down on the fact that they get to use weapons from Old Knight and other forbidden Terran technology only allowed to the Dark Angels Legion, not even allowed to Mechanicum. We also get to see how massive and powerful their fleet is, with numerous relic ships comprising a good chunk of their fleet. And we learn about the growing pains of how arrogance was kind of grinding them down a bit, which is fine. Every legion has growing pains, and one of the kind of underpinnings of the Great Crusade story is the importance of the Primarch in making their legions whole. Now, it doesn't mean that you need a Primarch post-heresy or anything, or you're going to slowly fall to pieces. No. But clearly, unifying with their Primarch, even for something like the World Leaders, had an important effect to the overall well-being of the Legion, for good or ill. In some cases, for certain legions, it quite literally was for genetic material to stabilize their gene structure and not degenerate horribly. Others, it was some type of growing pain or wound of the soul that gets mended and hardens them and makes them truly the heir of their genetic legacy, the Primarch genetic legacy. So all legions go through that growing pain in one way or another, and it's cool to be able to read up on the Dark Angels version of it, their growing pains, and see how the Lion really helps fortify his legion. We get a little bit about Luther, nothing about Cypher, because this is not on Caliban. We don't see anything about Caliban really talked about outside of the fact that it exists and the Lion's upbringing on it. But Luther's important because he finds the Lion, and we get just enough of little mentionings of in Luther's descriptor and in the Soros incident and in Cor Swain's entry, and one or two other places. We get just enough said that we know they're referring to eventually what will happen with the fallen angels, right? Cor Swain, little entry makes mention of how it's going to be a great burden on him to deal with that, with the fallen angels. And then we get mentioning elsewhere about the traitors, fallen angels, not called out by name, but just that something is looming later on in the timeline, and we know about it. But it was done well. My biggest concern was that the blanket of foreshadowing for the fallen would underwrite most of the lore for the Dark Angels, or a lot of what was said about them. It would be annoying and constricting, and they didn't do that. I was concerned because it tends to happen that way with Dark Angel lore. They didn't do any of that. What they did instead, to me, felt like they were saying, look, we know what happens with the traitorous fallen and Caliban. You know what happens with it. We know. You get involved in Space Marines and learn about the Dark Angels in 5 minutes, and you know. So we're not gonna beat you over the head with it here. We're just going to leave the morsels to say, hey, this is coming. We know it's coming. We're not trying to retcon anything, but that's it. And let's have some fun with cool new lore. And I appreciate that gesture and that feeling. What they also did really well, and this will be a little long-winded, this ramble, hence the title, is they did a really good job with incorporating the fact that the Dark Angels' origins and early history and time in the Great Crusade, even stuff in the Horus Heresy, is more or less a mystery, a secret, bound in a lock and key by the Dark Angels themselves and other agents. And this existed prior to, obviously, Book 9. Like, for years, this has been part of the Dark Angels' backstory. because, well, they didn't have a backstory for them really, outside of some specific points. So to fill in the void, we made the void a mystery and a secret. It works. It's a age-old trick that works for storytelling. However, that trick doesn't work here, because this is the age of those secrets. And Forge Drill did a good job with that, because they told us we got refreshing fact for the Dark Angels Legion. And we also got it with them stating before, after, and sometimes in the middle that, remember, nobody knows about this stuff because it's a secret. We get to read it because we're omnipresent readers and we got special, clearance for the archive or whatever the case might be. But the greater Imperium, the greater knowledge base for the Dark Angel stuff is unknown to outsiders. And here's why. Events, situations, campaigns too dire to be common knowledge, things that would bring people to insanity just by knowing it happened, stuff like that in 40k lore is bound under lock and key, which is most of what the Dark Angels fought in the beginning and throughout. So as a result, we get to learn about it, which is cool, and we also get reinforced that come post-heresy, this stuff would be a secret. So it's kind of cool. We're kind of in on the secret, which I like. This does beg some questions, but any lore that tries to do it this way is going to beg questions. Even lore that's in your face will beg some questions, like the Legion of Astartes prototyping. But anyways, they just did a good job. I can go on and slowly slip into going in deep instead of an initial impression. So I'm just going to wrap it up by stating, I think this was a fun book to read for sure. If you're not a Dark Angels fan and you don't really care about the lore of the Horus Heresy, you can skip it. And I say that not because it's a bad book. I say that because it's really their story, this book, and really meant to introduce them and do the foundations for them like all other Legions have had. And if that doesn't interest you at all, that's fine. But if you're a fan of them, even if you're not a fan of the 30k time period, let's say you just want to stick with 40k stuff only, but what you're a fan of, you like to gobble up the lore and have history stuff and information about them collected, it's worth picking up. I will say that about any of the first founding forces, traitor or loyalist, right? You want to see about the origins of the word bearers fall to heresy in a book like this? Go for it. Pick up that if you can, that Horus Heresy book from Forge World. You want some loyalist stuff, you want some Blood Angels, some White Scars, some Dark Angels, Ultramarines, whatever, pick up those respective books. So with that said, great read, a lot of fun for me as a Dark Angel fan. My biggest concern now is the fact that I am all amped up and wanting to paint up pre-heresy Dark Angels, and the only reason it's a concern is they don't fit, they won't be able to matriculate into my collection of post-heresy Dark Angels. So I gotta figure out a way to scratch that itch and still have it be Dark Angels and not some, quasi-successor that looks like pre-heresy Dark Angels. Anyways, what a problem to have, right? How dare they inspire me? Anyways, with that said, share your thoughts. Stay tuned for future rambles on this topic of Book 9 and the Horus Heresy in general, and non-heresy stuff too. And until next time, take it easy.